Section 2, Chapter 4. I love New York. Everyone in prison has a story about how they were caught. Sitting on the edge of a man's bunk while telling and listening to stories about how people got busted is about the same as being in the Boy Scouts and sitting around a campfire telling ghost stories. Being scared together created a great bond among boys, and being scared of each other created a great bond in prison. Most of the time, individuality was measured by how violent you could be, and this kept everyone on edge. But what we all had in common and what everyone liked to share is how we got caught. I loved those getting caught stories, and they were among the first ones I wrote down in my secret prison journal. They had what every story should have: action, running like a fleeing suspect across the surface, shadowed step by step, step for step by big risks and big emotions. Of course, they always ended about the same. Guys either turned themselves in, were taken by surprise, or were taken by force. But every one of them felt oh no, I lost my place. Hold on. What every one of them felt it differently. And did their own way. Everything from hard time to standing on their head. Since about half the guys in prison were in for bank robbery, I heard a lot of their stories. I met an ex-Green Beret who had robbed banks. He was running around with another man's wife, and he got tired of him. So to get rid of him, she had him rob a string of banks and hid the money with her. Then she called the FBI and turned him in. There was a Chinese man who didn't speak much English and couldn't read it. He was in for bank robbery too. His claim was that he was waiting for a bus when a man pulled up in a car and offered him $20 to run into the corner bank and hand a teller a note, then return with the package. He did what he was told. It was a stick-up note. The teller gave the Chinese guy a bag of cash. He gave it to the guy in the car, and soon after he was arrested while still waiting for his bus. One guy claimed he was a narcoleptic. He handed the teller the stick-up note, and then became so tense he passed out and woke up in custody. And then there were the usual ones: drug addicts who robbed banks to keep up their habits and were finally caught in the act. They didn't wear masks, they didn't even own cars, they didn't get but a few $1,000s each time. They were just playing a game of cops and robbers until they were caught. A lot of those guys had more friends and relatives in prison than out. Then there were the ones who shot bystanders and cops, their partner, or by accident themselves. A guy named Moon had dropped his gun and shot himself in the eye. I took his x-ray, and the .22 slug was clear as day in his frontal lobe. Another guy shot himself in the leg. The bone would never heal properly, and an infection spiked up, and he was rushed to the emergency room downtown, where a 2-inch section of his tibia and fibula were removed. Of course, we had the usual list of guys in for car theft, pimping, mail theft, murder, manslaughter, assault, burglary, larceny, arson, explosives, drug possession, drug dealing. And me for smuggling. This is how I got caught. After our stopover in Cape May, we came right up the New Jersey coast. By the evening, I could see the lights shining brightly on the Statue of Liberty. She was like a lookout, waving her arm and giving us the all clear. And behind her, the skyscraper of New York waited for us like a crowd held back, straining, ready to pounce. But were they a crowd of buyers or police? I stood on the bow and I looked through the binoculars. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I can tell you the fear of waiting to get caught was worse than getting caught. Every boat I saw, every noise I heard, every helicopter that spanked through the air, every searchlight that spun in its bright eye toward us made me jump. Would the police be expecting us? Would they come at us? With a police launch? Or would they just take their time and wait for us to start selling? Scan the water, the coastline, around the air. I knew they were watching us. Still, there was nothing to do but go forward and hope that Rick had made arrangements to sell the hash. You worried? Hamilton asked. Yeah, I said. I'll be worried until it's over. He laughed. The police aren't that smart. My greatest fear is a snitch. That's always the weak link. The police are too stupid to catch you on their own. Every fat ass Bobby in the world depends on his snitch to do the dirty work. I wasn't in the mood to hear it. I was creeped out of my skin and waiting for a cop to reach up over the stem and yell, "Gotcha." I returned to the bow and put on a life vest. I was a strong swimmer, and I figured I could dive overboard and make my way to Miss Liberty. I raised my binoculars to my eyes. If the cops were coming, I wanted to see them first. Since we hadn't hooked up with Rick, we didn't have a dock space reserved for us. Hamilton figured we'd just cruise around until we found something that looked available. But as it grew darker, it was difficult to spot any marina space. We went up the oil-slicked East River under the Brooklyn Bridge and along the east side of Manhattan, and along the way, sailors waved to us. I thought they had seen the British Union Jack and were friendly. In return, Hamilton gave them his royal wave as if he were the Queen of England, and I waved as if I were riding a homecoming float. What I didn't know is that the East River was closed to pleasure craft traffic, which is why we were being waved away, but no police launch pulled us over. We passed by LaGuardia Airport with the jets soaring above our heads and the hot breath of their engines rolling down over us. We made all the way up to Queens before spotting a lighted marina sign. Hamilton headed towards the orange bumpers at the end of the dock. "Should I drop an anchor?" I asked, and prepared to throw it over. "Slow us down." "No," he ordered. "Just take a line and jump on the dock and catch a cleat." As the boat ended up with the end of the dock, I jumped off and hooked a line around the cleat, but the wood was rotted and the cleat bolts ripped off the deck. I tried to haul the boat around, but it was a losing cause, and finally I had to drop the line before being pulled into the water. Bloody incompetent, Hamilton cursed and drifted onward until the bowsprit speared a metal barge. The barge was empty, and from the blow it sounded as if our arrival to Flushing had been announced with a Chinese gong. It brought the marina manager out of his little shed. Hamilton reversed the engine and sputtered back to where I could leap aboard, grab the line, and leap back into the dock, where I looped it around a solid piling head and pulled it snug. We made arrangements to keep the boat there. It seemed pretty remote, and we felt secure being so out of the way. We walked up to the dark street to payphone, and Hamilton called Rick. He was in his room and ready to start moving the hash. He had a car and had set up a 250-pound sale. The news cheered me up, and I didn't feel so gloomy anymore. Maybe, I thought, all that sitting around on the boat was making me paranoid. Maybe I should just relax and go with the flow. On the way back to the boat, I went into a little store and bought a case of cold beer and some food. As soon as I popped a beer open, I began to feel better. We had the boat tied up. We hadn't been caught on the way, and now that the selling had begun, the money would be flowing. I'd be paid and on my way to picking a new college. When we got back on board, Hamilton used an old bathroom scale to weigh out the kilos of hash. I packed them in the canvas bags, and when Rick arrived, we threw the hash in the trunk and took off with Hamilton driving like a madman. "Stick with the speed limit," Rick reminded him. "We don't want to get pulled over." "Nonsense," Hamilton said. "I used to be a professional driver in Manchester. I know what to do." "Hey, Rick," I butted in. "Did you get the crate okay?" "Yeah," he said, unfolding a map. "No problem, except for getting the screws out." I smiled. I had used extra long ones. We were heading for Woodstock, New York, about 90 miles away. There was a guy named Jerome who would meet us at some gas station, and we followed him to his place in the woods. Jerome was waiting for us in his psychedelic hippie van, which is decorated with day-glow Peter Max designs. He might as well have had a neon sign saying, "We have drugs. Arrest us now." He made me nervous. We followed him down the dirt road into the country and came to his small shingled house. There was something wrong with it. It was off-center, like something out of a fairy tale. "Built it myself," Jerome said proudly, hooking his thumb into the front of his jeans. He recited the Crooked Man nursery rhyme, and grinned. We all smiled politely. I thought he was different in some way. I figured a person could not invent himself into a crooked Jerome, but had to be born that way. Jerome's money connection hadn't arrived, and nobody knew why, especially Jerome. He made a few calls from his crooked wall phone, and kept assuring us the guy was coming. It's legit, he said, and pulled nervously on his long black beard as if it were black taffy. I swear it's legit. So we waited, and we waited, and we waited, until we thought the deal was crooked. But Jerome convinced us to spend the night. I was suspicious. His house was crooked. He might be too. Maybe he was as crazed as Charlie Manson and would kill us in our sleep. I was getting paranoid, not about the drugs, but about the people who use the drugs. In the middle of the night, I woke up on the couch. It was pitch black, and I staggered across the uneven floor and careened the walls off the walls and the furniture. I spotted a sliver of moon through the window. That was good enough for me. I climbed out and staggered off into the bushes until I figured I was lost and nobody could find me, even if they wanted to drive a 12-inch knife into my belly. I sat down against a tree and fell asleep. The next morning, no one seemed to be looking out for me, so I sneaked up on the house, fully expecting to find a bloodshed. Instead, everyone was up and smoking hash for breakfast. I was tired of that. I smoked a cigarette and had a cup of coffee. Not long after, Jerome's friend arrived with the money, and we were all relieved and happy as we counted out the cash. On the way back to New York, we got caught in a thunderstorm. The rain was blinding and the traffic slowed to something. Hamilton kept checking the rearview mirror. "What's up?" I asked. "We're being followed," he replied, and abruptly turned to the wheel. We went off the road and slid into the grass median. Already the rainwater had collected, and we sped like a ski boat down the swale. I was frozen with panic. We couldn't see a thing, but sheets of water rushing over us as if we were a sinking ship. I kept thinking we were going to hit a bridge, abundant and flattened up like a smashed beer can. We wouldn't be arrested. We'd be buried. "Slow down," Rick said. "No one is following us." "Bloody hell if they aren't," Hamilton spit back. "The same car that followed us up to Jerome's is behind us again." When we pulled into the gas station to meet Jerome yesterday, it pulled in behind us. "Why didn't you say something?" Rick asked. "Didn't know if we were being tagged until just now," he said. Hamilton kept plowing through the water, and when the rain lightened up, he veered up the side of the median and screeched back onto the highway and kept going. "I think we lost them," he said, and smiled thinly as he patted his beard into shape. "You're paranoid," Rick said. There was nobody back there. "Bloody hell," is all Hamilton said then, and "bloody hell," he said more viciously when we returned to the marina. As soon as we parked the car, the manager came running towards us. "Just to let you know," he said breathlessly, "during the storm, your boat broke away from the dock. I was going to go pull it in, but before I could do so, 2 men came up in a launch and boarded her. They tied her back up, and I think they threw another anchor over too." "Were they friends of yours?" At that moment, I knew my fears were real. We were doomed. The extra anchor was in the forecastle next to 500 pounds of hash. Whoever got that anchor knew what we were doing, and something was up. And I could only think it would get worse. I started looking around the marina to see if I could spot the cops. "Thanks," Hamilton said coolly to the marina owner, and he pulled back over to the street. "Rick," Hamilton ordered, "you take the cash and cars back to the hotel. Jack, you and I will move the boat. Let's go." And just like that, I was walking towards the dock, knowing for certain now that someone was watching us. Someone knew, and it had to be the police. I felt like Henry Fleming going into battle for the second time. I was afraid, but something inside me had already accepted that I would be caught, just as he had accepted his death. "They probably saw the hash next to the anchor," I whispered to Hamilton. "They may not know what it is," he replied. "Once I got caught with 40 pounds of hash in my suitcase, and I told the customs agent. It was Hair Henna from Egypt, and he let me pass. They aren't that smart. Maybe they were stupid, I thought to myself, but not that stupid. We boarded the boat and snooped around. Perhaps they were just decent people helping out? Hamilton asked. Now pull up the anchor and cast us off from the dock quietly. I want to drift for a while and see if we attract any friends. Remember, if anyone boards us, just play innocent. I'll tell them we're stealing the boat. The worst that happens is we're busted for theft. They won't fall for that, I said, and instinctively looked over my shoulder and stared into the dark buildings and boats. I could feel someone's eyes on me. I just couldn't see them. You always act so guilty, Hamilton said derisively. You attract bad vibes. Now pull the anchor. I pulled the anchor and we drifted across the marina's basin in the rain until Hamilton was satisfied that no one was following. Then we started the engine and motored down the inky East River with the tall checkered building blinking down at us. I stared back at them and felt as Marlowe had, searching the shoreline for Kurtz in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. At one point, a large barge nearly brushed up against us, and I imagined we would be boarded by cannibals. Finally, we rounded the tip of Manhattan and steered up the Hudson, where, without incident, we docked at the 79th Street Marina. Maybe our sailing luck was changing, I thought. Maybe Hamilton was right. I'm just paranoid. After we'd tied up, Hamilton advanced the marina operator some cash to look over things, and we caught a cab to Chelsea Hotel. I told you not to worry, Hamilton said, satisfied with himself as he caressed his beard. They aren't that smart. I'll breathe a lot easier when I have my money, and I'm out of here, I said. Relax, he said. You're bumming me out.